shake, rattle, and troll.
It's time for the award-winning Shake, Rattle, and Troll.
Yeah, here's to everybody. Grab your favorite pole. It's me and the boys gonna shake.
A show for the serious fishermen as well as the novice looking for tips from the pros. Shake, Rattle, and Troll, brought to you by Bill Luke Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram. I-17 and Camelback Road since 1927.
Yeah, we got the power, we got the speed. We're running wide open on a midsummer breeze. Freshwater, saltwater, watch out, boys. Bass Daddy Don's gonna make some noise. It's me and the boys gonna shake, rattle, and
Now, here's your host, saltwater fisherman, the man that fears no fish, Bass Daddy and Tournament Pro, Don McDowell.
Well, good morning, everybody. Guess what? This is not Don McDowell. This is Special K.
The next best thing.
Bass Daddy himself is up in the Great North, and he's hunting turkey. And he has asked that we all take care of him this weekend while he's gone. He has not successfully harvested a turkey yet. He has not heard any elk screaming, and he has seen plenty of deer, but he's got a deer tag up there in the better part of a month. So, with me this morning, Derek Franks from Stripper.
Oh, we're already in trouble. God.
Striper Snatcher, and Joy Nocta from Lookout Mountain. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning,
Hello.
KJ.
KJ, thank you. I appreciate that. The oxymorons continue. All right, Derek, let's talk about you first. I've seen plenty of pictures where you've been really whacking the stripers. What's going on out there?
Well, we've had a huge shift in weather. Our water temperature dropped from 87 degrees to probably 77 or 78 within the last week. I shifted to daytime operations. You know, most people know my success for being at night, which is weird because the last few night trips I could detect a shift. The thermocline has risen significantly, and I decided, what the heck, I'm just going to start fishing during the day. That's when they're the most active. So I found a lot of striper and a lot of white bass and a lot of largemouth bass that have transitioned into the northern creek arms. And basically, there's certain parts of the day that you can just really whack them with a lot of beginner-friendly techniques. So it's getting fun out there right now for all the daytime anglers.
What's the size on these fish now? Because when I fished with you early in the summer, you know, we were looking at what I'll call dinks, you know, the 12, 13-inch fish.
Yeah, well, those dinks are always around. You know, the interesting thing about Lake Pleasant is you think that whacking as many out as I do would knock them down, but there are actually so many, it's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, yesterday I ran into a big school of striper, and I was like, I know they're there, I can see them. And so we're dropping our spoon, nothing, not catching anything, but I can see them on the screen in shallow water. So I was like, well, what the heck, I'll just throw a net out there. And I threw a cast net just to get an idea, because that's a good play for me. You throw a net to see exactly what you're dealing with, and I let it sink, and I pulled it up, and I had about 50 striper about the size of a cell phone.
Serious?
Yeah, and they're everywhere. So striper are size-oriented schooling fish. So if you get into a school of them that are small, you just go somewhere else. But you don't have to look hard to find schools of fish. Now, my hot spot lately.
Wait a minute, are we gonna let people know this?
Well, I'm not going to tell them the whole truth.
Okay,
just part of it.
Just part of it. Good enough. They're in the water.
They're in the water.
In the lake.
I will give you one tip.
Rhymes with pleasant.
Yeah, I'll give you one solid tip is you want to fish Lake Pleasant in a south wind. And a south wind blows from exactly 12 o'clock noon till dark. And what happens is it blows bait into the bays. For me, Castle Creek and
Wait a minute. So what you're saying, from 12 o'clock noon to 6, the wind is from the south, more south than the southwest, which we typically have.
Exactly. What happens normally is at night / in the morning, it'll be blowing out of the north, north to south. And when that happens, the bait just does not congregate in the creek arms that I like to fish. I was out there early yesterday morning fishing in the opposite wind of ideal. We didn't catch anything. Took a break. The wind shifted, and we caught everything. So it's not necessarily where you are, it's just a matter of when. There's a lot of components involved. Location is a big deal because on Lake Pleasant it's huge, and there's there's a lot of spots where there are striper, but there's also, more favorite spots than others.
All right, when you say you're whacking up, rough numbers, how many fish are you catching in, say, a 4 to 5 hour period?
Around 100 or so. Yesterday we were catching them. It's fun because we're catching them off 3.5-inch swim baits on a 1/4-ounce jig head, and I like to preach on beginner tactics because I take beginners out. So I'm going to do what's the easiest way to catch them, and the easiest way to do it is to position your boat into the wind and troll about 2 miles an hour, let out 100 yards of line, and you can see the striper, they're suspended, which tells me that they're moving. You can look at the arches and tell that they're facing upward.
What do you mean, arches?
On the sonar, you could see the striped bass and the largemouth bass and the white bass. They're pointed upwards. They're feeding in the high parts of the water column, about 10 feet under the boat, and there's no way to catch them unless you can almost match speed with them and drag a bait
right through
on a flat trajectory through them, and they will pound it. So it's a fun way to catch them. You don't have to do any kind of drop shotting with anchovies or anything like that. So the boat doesn't smell. I don't smell. You're using a...
Wait a minute.
I don't smell. Okay. I won't smell any more than when I showed up.
Okay. That'll work for you.
Yeah.
All right. Joey, you were on an elk hunt. You were not, while you didn't have a tag, you were helping people, correct?
Yeah. 3 friends were drawn in Unit 1. That'd be a pretty special tag.
Sure, right now.
And 2 of the 3 took it to the limit trophy hunting.
And the third?
The third missed 3 shots. So
strikeout.
At the best bulls that he's ever shot at. The other 2 guys are very experienced and have taken numerous mature bulls.
Yeah.
But the big bulls didn't seem to show up until about the last 4 days, and that's when they initially were going to open up. But now that you've spotted what you've been looking for, they took it to Thursday evening.
What was their minimum? 350, 360?
Dan passed up a bedded 355 bull at 25 yards. That'll give you an idea of what they were looking for.
So they were looking for the 400-inch bulls.
Well, they were something over Boone and Crockett.
Sure.
Yeah. And they both had their opportunity. They were close. But they found out that Unit 1 with that burn in some of that thick country was worse walking than what it used to be.
I've found the same thing because I've gone through where the old Rodeo Chetasky fire was. And if you go back now for, 13 years since the fire, it has grown up incredibly thick. And you're no longer dealing with lack of vegetation. You're dealing with scars and bleeding and everything else trying to bust through some of that stuff.
Well, through heavy rains after that burn, it washed a lot of the the dropping pine needles and whatever that made a blanket, a carpet over it. And then it exposed rock. So not only were they dealing with the elevation,
sure,
steep hills on some of those mountains, but now they're trudging over. Every one of them twisted ankles. Every single one of them had a twisted ankle before it was all said and done. So it was tough, but they enjoyed it. To finally see a Boone and Crockett bull, which I'm going to guess that 9 out of 10 bow hunters think they see a 400-inch bull about every time they go out, and the realization is they probably never ever have seen one in their lives, and probably never will. So, it happens, but they don't grow on trees.
There's when you see a really good 6x6 or a 7x7, the immediate reaction from people who are accustomed to seeing rag bulls is, okay, it's the monster bull. But when you start scoring it mentally, and as well as I do, you can look at some of the tips to see how long they are, see how wide the animal is, how long those last 2 points are. But I always go to G3. If you take a look at G3 and if it's under 10 inches long, you don't have a 386 bull. It's just not happening.
Right.
So.
And there, a lot of the newer guys bow hunting, or just in general, any hunter that's just getting started, if they're up scouting, some of the lower elevation units where maybe the bulls are still running together at the start of the hunt. That's when they get a good idea, because if there happens to be an exceptional bull in the bunch, and they're looking at 6x6s already, and then this monster steps out, then they get a realization of what a bigger bull might be. So
I always look for mass and width and the length of the tines, and then I start getting picky looking at the tine length itself to see what they're looking at.
Well, there was both of these bulls came out at 27. One was 402/8.
Ooh.
And a guy that we know that is a retired guide out of Alpine put this guy on this spot in 27. Out-of-state hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And you should see the tine length on this bull. It is, I mean,
crazy.
When people see this picture, they know that they're looking at something they've never seen before. So,
on my son's hunt, we were up in Unit 4A, which typically does not have large bulls, and yet the bull that he shot, which was not the herd bull, his bull scored probably in the 330 area, which
is nice.
Oh, it's a great bull, and he enjoyed it thoroughly. But the biggest thing was we looked at his thirds. His thirds were 19 inches each.
Oh,
so
excellent.
Yeah, in one more year, and again, a lot of the bulls we see, they were getting tired at that point. So, there it is. We're going to have to take a break. We'll come back. I'm Special K
with Derek Franks,
Joe Nocta.
Sink right down to the
my toes in the water, ass in the sand.
Not a worry in the world, a cold beer in my hand. Life is good today. Life is good.
Derek, that's your kind of music.
You know it.
How many days a week are you out on the water now?
5 on a slow week.
5 on a slow
5
week.
days a week, yeah. I need to get a sunblock sponsor now.
Well, a pale little white guy like you, yeah, with that red hair, I think that there's some call for that.
Exactly.
You got to worry about that.
I know.
You got to start hatting. You got to start covering your neck.
I'm going to go with the snow-based striper sniper pattern.
Sniper pattern.
Yeah, tongue twister.
What is that?
Well, a lot of people like to wear that UV screening.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get the mask, definitely, because you get so much reflection off the water that a hat almost doesn't really cut it. No. But I tell you what, yesterday was an interesting day out there. They had a sailboat race, and
you're fishing in a sailboat race.
Fishing 100 boats out there, so I'm leaving. I went to the dock 3 times to drop people off and pick people up. So this is a funny story. My girlfriend had to help me because, when you're by yourself and there's that many boats, you got to have somebody to help you out.
Somebody spotting for you.
You have to, yeah.
2 o'clock, 4 o'clock?
It was probably 2 o'clock after I've already broken half the stuff on the front of my boat, which I'll get into later, but I jumped off the boat and onto the dock, and Robin has never been on the boat by herself. And so she's having to dodge all these wackos with sailboats, and it's probably about a 30-minute wait in the harbor. And she is freaking out.
Wait a minute. You left her in the boat
to go get the rig. Yeah. And so she was having a mild stroke. She said it took a year off her life. But she survived. I was like Morpheus on the Matrix. I had my phone out and I could see her, so I'm telling her where to turn, left and right. All the traffic patterns there's boats going way faster than they should in the no wake zone, And so Robin was rattled.
Where is the Coast Guard when you need it?
Yeah,
I take it she doesn't have a lot of practice backing up a trailer.
No, well, I was like, you have 2 choices. And she's like, well, I'll do the boat. And see that Pleasant Harbor's south ramp is still closed from all the debris
from
stacking up in there. Yeah.
Yep.
With the, So everyone's jammed up in that north ramp, and there's only 2 spots for a boat on that little bitty ramp. So when there's 100 boats trying to get out, you got to get crafty, So
my goodness.
Yeah. But earlier in the day, I was telling you a second ago, being out on the water, your fortune can snap in an instant.
Go through that litany for us.
Okay, well, early in the day, I took 3 different friends, and we are piping striped bass on swim baits, which is the most fun way of catching them. And we took a break. I had just put some sunblock on my hands, and I'm holding a Shimano Corrado, one of my favorite rod and reels, and I throw in about 4 foot of water. I'm fishing this shelf drop off, this transition area that they like to congregate. Well, there was some, I'm going to call it a rock bass, but anyway, something hung up on my line, and I lost the whole rod and reel.
Slipped out of your hand.
Slipped out of my hand.
The greasy spoon.
Yeah, flew right out. And I was like, God, you got to be kidding me. So I slam, of all things to slam, I slammed my foot on the foot-controlled trolling motor. That's the most expensive thing on the boat. And it broke it immediately. And I'm like, God, now what are we going to do? And so Robin's like, well, I'm going in after it. So she hops in the water like a trooper and finds the rod and reel. We managed to get that, and then luckily
she found it by trolling with her feet.
Yeah, shuffling her feet, found it. So yeah, it was kudos to her on that. And
kudos? Excuse me, I think you owe somebody.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
definitely. So yeah, she gets an A+ for that, and then I've got a lot of good friends on AZ Anglers, my social media website I belong to, and I explained the problem I was having, and a buddy of mine, a client, he owns a CNC milling shop, and he actually machined a threaded coupling to be able to get me back on the water for today's trip. So that was huge.
And your sunglasses?
The sunglasses, I
torture
tested some Oakleys, and they didn't make it. So yeah.
So basically, you're out $100.
Oh, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Oakleys went down. There was no repairing those.
No, Oakleys went down. No fixing those. So,
have you ever heard of super glue?
Duct tape. I tell you, where I come from in Texas, duct tape is the commodity that you should buy stock in. And zip ties.
I think zip ties and duct tape are the prerequisite anytime you move south of the Mason-Dixon line.
It is. Yeah, I mean, you can make a tow rope out of zip ties if you had to.
You know what? I've seen an awful lot of photos from the South on the innovative uses of duct tape. Have you ever seen any of those, Joey?
I have friends in Africa that used to come out of Zimbabwe when the hunting season was over, and they would literally off-road with GPSs to the coast in Mozambique. They were some of the first fishermen ever on these virgin beaches.
Oh my.
And to get to these beaches, I mean, just was an insane trip. Initially, they had to watch out for landmines because Mozambique had their war, and but anyway.
Other than that, how was the play?
They got the boat down there. They planned on being there for a couple of weeks, and day one they put a hole in the boat. Out come the duct tape, and they made their whole trip with duct tape in the hole in the boat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's impressive.
They redid it a few times, but he said it was no issue. I said, how far were you going out? And he said, you didn't have to go far out then. He said they were catching fish so big from shore they couldn't bring them in.
Wow. Whoa.
Yeah. So obviously some big tuna were lighting them up, and but they didn't have to go very far with the boat, so they felt safe. But
how long ago was that? 20, 30 years ago?
No, probably 12, 14 years ago, yeah.
Right around the turn, 2000.
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
Well, they were doing it long before that, but they were just fishing from the shore. But the duct tape came in when they started hauling the boat down there.
We should request that anybody who has the most innovative use of duct tape, please send us photos to the Shake, Rattle, and Troll website. I'd love to see some of these things.
MacGyver status.
Yeah, MacGyver status.
Yep.
All right, so you had 3 people that you took out yesterday. No wonder he walked out of his vehicle today and he was listing. He's back and forth listing. And I'm looking at him going, Derek, are you on the juice already this morning?
Oh, I feel like I might need to be. No, when you're on the water a lot, your vertigo gets kind of thrown off. So I've been spending a lot more time on the water than I'd like to admit. But yeah, you're on the water a lot when 2 things happen. 1, you got to sleep with your feet on the ground, and 2, your hands feel like you've arm wrestled Freddy Krueger.
Serious?
Yeah, because of
how do you sleep with your feet on the ground?
Perpendicular to the mattress.
That
you got to get crafty.
The comfort level there is just not.
I know.
I'm not. tracking on that one at all.
Yeah, especially when Robin does jumping jacks in her sleep. Just about. So there's no rest for the weary fishing guide.
You know, I think the filming of their bedroom, non-activity-wise, just them sleeping would be enormously entertaining.
Yeah.
You're sleeping with your feet on the ground. She's doing jumping jacks in her sleep.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's... I'm thinking about just getting the old lazy boy on the nitro and taking a little nap while I'm guiding out there, because it's fun. But I tell you...
You're starting to get into the catfishing zone when you do that. You know
exactly. Lazy man status. But I tell you, these last few trips I've done, I've been taking a lot of, and I'm glad, but I've been taking a lot of people that can appreciate the size average that we've been catching. But I did 4 trips last week where the average fish was 22.5 inches.
Average.
And that's unbelievable.
See, I will fillet that. I am not filleting an 8-inch fish anymore. Ever again. That's done. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
You said you were using swim baits. How were you fishing the swim baits?
Well, you guys hang on to that.
Yeah.
We're going to get that on the way back in.
Definitely.
All right. I'm John Colazar
with StriperSnatcher.com.
And Joan Octa.
I felt the rush of the Rio Grande into Yellowstone, and I've seen firsthand Niagara Falls.
We're back. Yeah, Joey's flashing a picture of a 400-inch bull, and if you look at it, the difference is you look at those back tines, they're nice and long, he's wide, and those thirds are just absolutely spectacular.
No doubt.
Well, when you really look it over, his swords are actually the smallest tine on him, which is very unusual. But that's some tine length right there. World-class tine length.
He's over 60 plus, right?
I do believe, is it this one or the other bull that was actually 62 inches? I'm not sure of the main beam length on this bull here, but a very famous bow hunter's son took a Boone and Crockett Plus bull in 27 also.
Really?
Yeah, and you know what, I'm not going to dwell on that, but because I'm sure he wants to do his own story on that. But again, this same guide helped him a little bit and put him in the right spot in 27. So, retired guide.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I noticed this year. We're hearing all kinds of stories, you and I both. Units 9 and 10 this year were awfully quiet. They were sporadic calling. I was in 4A with my son, and it was just spectacular. And you were in 1 and 27, and they were lighting up at the end.
Well, no, they actually were. They lit up the whole time, because your higher elevation units like that, 1 and 27, typically start early. Mm-hmm. And but what they were running into was 300 to maybe 330, 40-inch bulls that had cows. Mm-hmm. 25 to 30 cows per bull, which the bull-to-cow ratio kind of surprised me, in at least in Unit 1 where these guys were hunting.
You know,
but later on...
Game and Fish says, and if you read their statistics, you know, for a premium unit, they want 30 to 35 to 40 bulls per 100 cows. And in the trophy, and most of the other units, you know, they're happy if they get that 25 bulls per 100 cows. So that means there's a whole lot of guys without ladies. If you've got one bull with 25 cows, that means there's a whole lot of guys.
Well, the other thing was the lack of satellite bulls. This was initially, but like I said, they were trophy hunting, and they were going to open up the last 4 days. And that's when the big bulls started showing up. Then all of a sudden the herds they were seeing was a huge upgrade in the size of the bull that was running the herds. So I think what happens, you actually have breeding bulls early.
Yeah.
And then they get kicked out, and so what happens? Whose gene pool is in there, you know?
You know, I took some pictures. I had some photos of a bull that attempted to mount a cow several times. And this is end of August 20th. He was fully cleaned off. He was ready. He was armed and dangerous. and the cows are all grazing, and he was trying to mount cow after cow after cow, and he'd get up on their backs, and the next thing you know, the cow would move about 8 to 10 inches, and he was done. You know, he never succeeded. She just moved away briefly, and that romantic encounter was not to be. But a lot of those bulls were attempting to mount cows real early in the season this year. I saw several of those things where they were just thinking they were going to happen. And the bigger bulls, at that point in time, by August 20th, they're not even there yet.
Right.
They're not worried. They're not interested. And I don't think the cows, I mean, they may be, how do we phrase this delicately? There may be a coupling that goes on, but I don't think the cows are being fertilized at that point.
Well, that's probably a good thing because you want to.
Yeah, you want the better breeding stock to be through that. Now, we saw a lot of activity early, and I can pinpoint to the day that first weekend in September, they were starting to bugle, particularly in 23, because I go up almost every week and I hear them, you know, they're screaming up in there. And it built to the end of September, and the end of September, it's just crazy. I mean, you know, I'll go up there on, you know, Thursday mornings or something like that and listen to them sometimes, and they're just, it's amazing how you can call them in. Did you have any particular call that was working well for you?
Yeah, my secret weapon.
Oh.
Did it have duct tape in it?
Yeah.
Rubbing 2 zip ties.
An old flute player with duct tape around the edges.
I can tell you
custom.
what, if you're using the same cow call as what everybody else is using, these animals are not stupid. You give them a week of hearing that same call, and pretty soon they associate it with danger. I use a call, very raspy, nasty sounding cow call that just works like a champ. And no, I'm not going to give the name out, but yeah. I have, you know what? I've gone through a lot of work to see what makes this work, and not only that, playing with elk with several different calls to see which one they're responsive to. I've done the same thing with turkeys to see which call they like the best. Mm-hmm. And bottom line is, find a call that no one else is using that they will accept, and you will fool them a lot more often than normal.
Okay, got a question for you then. Talking about calls. Generally, I like to mew softly. I almost exclusively cow calls. I mean, I don't even waste my time anymore with bugling other than to locate.
Right.
But on the cow calls, noise level, what were you finding? Anything interesting this year?
A lot of that has to do with how far you're trying to call. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to really reach out, I'd let her loose. And then, yeah, and still it would spark up the bulls that were closer than I thought they would be, but it was also reaching out to you know, other animals that were much further away. But then again, I'm not hunting. I'm not going to chase these bugles down because there's other people out there hunting. And, you know, I'm doing my friends a favor and trying to locate something very nice for them. And I want to be very blunt. I was very careful where I called. I made sure there was nobody else in the area where I was calling. I don't want to mess up anybody's hunt. But getting back to the sound of the call, the best advice I could give, especially in a spotty rut, is people have a tendency to give up too early. Mm-hmm. They cow call a couple minutes, and then they're done. They leave. And what's happening is these bulls will come in silent. Yeah. If the rut's real spotty, I hang out 45 minutes, and I've had them come in later than that, and they will absolutely pinpoint you. I call every 5 to 6 minutes, very softly.
You know, it was
shut it down.
After my son harvested his bull. You know, we packed it out. We shot that bull probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we had it in the reefer truck by 11:30, which was awesome.
Very nice.
Yeah, I was thrilled to death. Although I'll tell you what, carrying a 100-pound back leg, you know, 500 yards and over fences is not my idea of a good time. But we got that done, and we went down into Payson, and he had a friend who hadn't seen or heard a bull in 3 days of hunting. I took him out with my son that evening. So from 11:30, we dropped down into Payson, got a hotel room, got cleaned up, went out and met him, and at 5:15 I started calling. Well, typical of the patterning that is in there. We were upside Bonita Creek. I started calling and immediately had responses. And then 20 minutes later, we knew that those bulls were going the other direction. I could tell they had topped a ridge and were going down the other side. So I kept calling a couple times, and all of a sudden, here's something coming behind us. Well, it's a little raghorn. And the guy hadn't seen or shot anything in 5 years, and he just said, I want the meat. Right. That bull came to 15 yards and whacked. And he didn't go maybe 30 yards, and that was it. He was done.
Nice.
So we had 2 bulls down in one day, harvested 2. So they went to get the truck, went to do all the things that they had to do, and I was the one who stayed with the bull and started skinning it. Those bulls that seemed to go away started milling around. They came back. And this is like a half hour, 45 minutes later, they were within 150 yards of us. But they sounded like they were going away, but all they were doing was kind of milling around. I mean, it was amazing to me that if you just wait and take your time and stay there, sometimes they'll come in, particularly if you don't overcall. If you're not overcalling, you're going to get them that way.
Well, years ago, I was helping a friend in a particular canyon in 5B North, and we got a bull on the hook, and he decided to go after it. And I said, well, look, don't use your call. I said, I'll keep him responsive here so you can work into the bugle. So this goes on, and I'm not overdoing it. Every 5-6 minutes, I'm hitting this thing, and this bull lit up. Gave him plenty of time to, try to work in on him. And then I lose him. He disappears. I had no radio contact with him, but it was a good 45 minutes later, and I'm sitting on a cliff edge, and there's probably 10 feet of rock behind me, and I'm actually hearing hooves on the rock. And that bull came in right behind me and was looking right over the top of me as I took 30 seconds to turn my head and get a look at him. I mean, this bull was 7-8 feet away from me, looking down into the canyon.
Wanting to see what was down in the bottom.
A little wind shift, and I mean, he rolled out of there. So I did it again. Same exact spot. Another bull came in 15 yards from me, and it ended up entering the canyon. I went, I'm going to log this in the memory book. So
absolutely.
Now I hold my ground and put 45 minutes in on a spotty rut.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we look for. A little bit of information on what to do. We'll be back. Some of that good music.
Yeah, boy.
You know what? I think Don's going to be embarrassed that he was up there that long without a turkey. I hope he's back today, but he may stay an extra day, I think. I know he's had that opportunity. And quite frankly, for all of us, it doesn't really matter if you get one. It's being up there that counts.
That's, yep. You got to start somewhere. I mean, it's, it ain't in the getting, it's in the going.
Absolutely. For us, just being up there is what it's all about. That is like a pressure release valve on my whole soul when I'm able to be up there doing that. Just like for you. You're on the water, you're happy.
Yesterday was fun because it was recreational fishing. I wasn't guiding. I was just letting my hair down, fishing new spots. That's what I encourage. If there is no good old boy spot for striper fishing. I mean, there are places that they like, but they're not always going to be there. They're going to move all day, every day.
When I was with you, we were just, at that time of year, we were just looking for them to be jumping out of the water. And once we saw that, then we knew where we needed to be. Once the shadow's starting to jump, then you just into
Definitely.
It you go.
Yeah, and you know how fast they are. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, to be successful striper fishing, you got to be willing to fish fast and cover a lot of water.
Well, I noticed that it was us. You had the trolling motor on full tilt, and we still weren't catching up to them.
Exactly. Yeah, and another thing is you got to be able to read that sonar, because right now they're actively chasing bait. So you've got to find the shad. I know that sounds like I'm repeating myself a lot, but you got to find them and stay on them. The northern creek arms have the most bait I've ever seen on a sonar. And if you can stay in that general area, you'll catch fish the entire time the wind's blowing out of the south, which is
half the day.
Half the day. Yeah, you just catch them until you don't feel like catching them anymore.
I was surprised that, based on the canyons that Lake Pleasant has around it and a lot of the mountains to the north end of it, that's where some of that, what I call, the whistling winds come through. But, Arizona, predominantly, we have winds out of the southwest. How about, what did you do? I mean, the last few weeks we've had a couple of hellacious monsoons. How did that affect your fishing?
Well, I tell you, the fish prematurely fall into a fall pattern. Like this time last year, we were significantly lower in water elevation, so that concentrates them easier. But now we're probably 20 feet higher than we were last year.
Serious?
Yeah. So it really jacked up the fall tactic. A lot of regular fishermen like to go to the same spot and look for surface action and all that. Well, that's not there. So you got to improvise really well. It's a weird tactic. It's almost like we skipped half of the first of the fall tactic because of the water elevation, but you just have to make those adjustments accordingly and look at the sonar. The biggest feature I look for is I will find those no wake buoys. The Fish and Game puts them there for a reason, to keep people out of the inside parts of them, from the bank to the buoy. So as you're watching people run their lower unit into the inside of those buoys, I just run along as I'm dragging a line. Dragging a swim bait is the best way to find out where they are. And what I'll do is I will find the transition spot where the river channel meets the cove, which you'll see it because it'll drop from 5 feet to 30 or so pretty
real quick.
So I'll zigzag all up and down that until I find the fish, and they're not going to stay still. They're going to be moving 4 or 5 miles an hour all day. So you will catch up with them. I use a small 150 horsepower engine, so at 500 RPM, I'm at an ideal trolling speed.
5 miles an hour is a 12-minute mile, and that's a healthy pace walking.
Yeah,
it really is.
And you can cover a lot of ground. And when you get hooked up, you turn the engine off, reel the fish in, make a mental note of where they are, swing around and make some casts and let it drop and then reel it in. But going back to the bait I use 2 baits right now for good reason. One, you use a heavy spoon. Why? Because it's windy. And if you're using light tackle with a light spoon, that bait will never get on top of that fish because you drift too fast. So if you use a 1 ounce to 2 ounce spoon with about a 3-inch body, I like to use white with a blue back or white with a black back. I don't like to use a flashy chrome, even though the water's dingy and it would probably work. But you drop it, you want a high drop rate. So you can, when you really get on the fish, you can catch them with a spoon. When they're kind of sporadic and running around, you throw that paddle tail 3.5-inch swim bait on a 1/4 ounce jig head, and it'll deal death to them. But going back to the water clarity, a lot of people are like, Derek, why is the water so dirty? It looks muddy. But it's not mud, it's an algae bloom. If you look at your sonar and you know what you're looking at, you can see plankton going from the top all the way to the thermocline level, which is 30 feet down. And
serious, that much plankton buildup.
And what that is that's nutrients for those shad. That's why those shad are in there. That's why it's important for the wind to be blowing from the south, because it blows that plankton back into the concentrations of the coves.
Yep.
And the striper fry as well as the shad fry just jump into that plankton, and you could just see them cutting through those clouds of plankton, and then the game fish would be right behind them. And for all the people that say that largemouth bass fishing on Pleasant is tough, well, you fall into that tactic, you will catch largemouth bass. I can see them on the sonar. Largemouth look like egg-shaped ovals on the bottom of the sonar because they're not moving. They're fixed on a structured drop-off on those transition. They're just staying there. So you can drop a drop shot, anything, and just jig it slightly, and they'll bite it. I mean, it's no big deal to catch 5 or 10 largemouth a day now. And
have you been catching that many?
Yeah, and that's unheard of. But
any size to that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've caught some 15 to 20 inchers. I mean, that's real good for that lake.
Yeah, it is. 20-inch bass?
Yeah, so we take a photo, throw them back. A shout out to Rattle Trap. Rattle Trap makes some of the best baits to incorporate like that. You throw it has a high drop rate, let it sink, slow roll it through largemouth are chasing shad just like the striper are, and with that low visibility, that rattle trap just really pops them.
Well, when they redid the dam made the lake bigger.
Yeah.
A lot of fishermen were predicting the state record would come out of there, but I don't know if they've gone over 14 pounds at Pleasant. Which
for striper?
No, for largemouth.
Serious?
Oh yeah, I think the record at the lake is high 13s.
Yeah.
But it never reached that, and what do they say? If you get new water, if it doesn't happen in the first 7 years, it ain't going to happen. Yeah.
I'm still interested in what kind of catfish we have down in the bottoms by that old dam.
Well, I tell you what, I've got some photographs I haven't showed anyone yet, but I've actually got GoPro cameras that I've dropped down and recorded some reconnaissance of the old dam that was blown in 91.
Really?
And I've got sonar and video of where the TNT blast actually hit the dam. And you can see the metal bent all crazy. And it's in 235 foot of water right now or something like that. And there's fish down there. I mean, I got them on camera, and they're not small. The fish that we were catching that were 2 feet long were the size of a rice grain at the sonar level, and there's sonar profiles that are 4 times that down there, and there's shadows going past the GoPro that are blacking out the whole thing. So it's there's fish down there, but unfortunately the water temperatures dropped so much down there that I pulled out of hanging out there, but we caught 100 striper over 22, 23 inches in that general area of where the old dam structure was. So there are fish there.
That's some big fish.
Yeah.
Well, how big was that cat out of Bartlett? 76?
76 pounds, yeah. Yeah.
It could happen at any one of those lakes.
Yep. We were fortunate this week. We do not have anybody for roll call in the current theater, but we do have a special read today for a couple of people, and we're going to do that now. For those who remember, and there's not a lot of us anymore, but World War II, I was born after that. And there were 2 people from Arizona who passed away this week who were Pearl Harbor survivors. Chief Lambert Motter passed away on October the 5th in Mesa, Arizona. And Henry Height, he was a Pearl Harbor survivor as well, was buried this week at the National Cemetery in Cave Creek. Many thanks to the service these members of the greatest generation gave to us. Your watch is over. Farewell, Godspeed, fair winds in the following sea, good sirs. Amen, everybody. Have a great one.
In the Colgren, wherefore?
And the boys like to shake, rattle, and troll.
It's time for the award-winning Shake, Rattle, and Troll.
Yeah, kids to what they buy. Grab your favorite poles. Me and the boys gonna shake.
A show for the serious fishermen as well as the novice looking for tips from the pros. Shake, Rattle, and Troll brought to you by Bill Luke Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram. I-17 and Camelback Road since 1927.
Yeah, we got the power, we got the speed. We're running wide open on a midsummer breeze. Freshwater, saltwater, watch out, boys. Bass Daddy Don's gonna make some noise. It's me and the boys gonna shake, rattle, and
Now, here's your host, saltwater fisherman, the man that fears no fish, Bass Daddy and Tournament Pro, Don McDowell.
You know, it seems a little weird not to have the Bass Daddy here this morning, doesn't it, guys?
Bass Daddy ain't
Yes,
here,
it
but
is.
Striper Daddy is.
Yeah. And it's not good to have Pat Daddy not here either. I always count on him to do all the photos and everything else to take care of stuff for us.
He does our media ops.
All right, I'm gonna switch gears. Last week we had Congressman Matt Salmon on, and on a political front, he's probably as good as we get. He happens to represent my district, which is just Congressional District 5 for the state of Arizona. Avid outdoorsman, certainly one of the more intelligent. I know sometimes everybody makes a joke that an intelligent politician is an oxymoron, but he is. He certainly is a bright guy. does a lot of good things for us, and he works really, really hard. And tying that into the state of Arizona has a unique situation here. And Joey, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Both of you guys, Derek, you do fishing constantly, but hunting is for Joey and I, it's something that we don't get to do every year. I mean, you're blessed. You can go out on the water any day that you want to, and you can fish. You can do that which you love. Joey and I have to get drawn. And if we're not drawn, we're helping somebody or trying to help somebody or advertising for people we can help to find something. Uh-huh. Joey, the Game and Fish Commission, I've been trying this now since 1992, trying to get a conservation bonus point. And you're a perfect person for it. What are your thoughts on it? If you were to say, I'm going to work 20 hours for a year, during the year, 20 hours on projects that the Arizona Game and Fish has, would you put in that 20 hours if it gave you a conservation bonus point?
I'd give them as many hours as they wanted to get that extra bonus point.
See, we're in the same mindset there, and that is that, number one, I firmly believe that people who are locked and loaded into the electronic world tend to find other things to do. Playing video games during.
I'm not Candy Crushing. I'm doing promo work.
Okay, he's doing promo work. But if you ever go to any place where there's a lot of people, half the people are now working on their iPhones.
It's sad.
I mean, the discourse is such, but getting out into the remote areas, we don't see people coming out of the woodwork to help on projects, and I've always been astounded by it. I remember the very first time I did a project, it was on the Flying M Ranch, just south and east of Flagstaff. We went in, just a group of guys from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and we spent Saturday all day, and we cleared 40 acres from PJ into pasture land. And I thought, my goodness, it was being overrun with PJ. It was his prime area for pasture, but it was being overrun. And these weren't giant PJs, but these were 8 to 10 footers. We cleared them out, cut them down, did everything we had to do. And at the end of the day, number one, we had an appreciation for how difficult it is and how much water is absorbed by these trees. Number two, the rancher was thrilled. We had a big dead pile that, they slash piled them, and at the end, when the rains came in, they burned them, and all of a sudden he's got a great pasture. And I'm thinking,
was that right next to his ranch?
It was close to his ranch. It wasn't right next to it, but it was close, yeah.
I know exactly where you're talking about.
See, we did that. This is going back into the 90s, and I thought, if more people would come up and just do on a cooperative basis, if people were to work for 20 hours, just on a full weekend, and we were to give them a conservation bonus point, and each year they'd have to work a minimum 8 hours to maintain that. Think of the opportunities there would be for habitat improvement. But my question is, how many people would do it? What do you think?
It's hard to say. I mean, if you told someone that you were guaranteed a tag, you'd have everybody and his brother out there.
Sure.
Okay, so now you're working for a bonus point that, yes, it does help you out. Anytime you get an extra bonus point, that can help. Your percentage goes up as far as getting drawn.
I know people say that, yeah.
I think they might be surprised. I think your dedicated hunters will go out there and do it.
Okay, we have 100,000 applicants for elk, just as a good number. How many people do you think go to commission meetings each meeting?
Less than 1%.
Tell you something? There's less than 0.1% that go to meetings. There are typically, and when you have a hot issue, you might get 50, 60 people in the commission meeting. But if you typically go to a regular monthly, and they have them all across the state, you'll have maybe 10, 12 people. And what you will have is on the adversarial side, the wolf advocates or the condor advocates or people who have issues with hunting. They represent more than we do. Hunters just don't come to those meetings, and it drives me crazy when you go to a commission meeting and there's nobody there. In the conservation bonus point, there are people who say, no, you're not going to do a conservation bonus point because I don't have time to do that. Well, that doesn't wash. If you have time to hunt, you have time to get a conservation bonus point. And my biggest concern is that the kids 12 and under who don't know anything realistically other than the video game stuff that they see, they don't have an appreciation for what you and I know is how hard it is to see wildlife, how long you have to spend glassing, and how much you have to learn the land. And it's not, there isn't a 400-inch bull around every pinyon juniper tree that you have up north. It takes a lot of glassing. It takes a lot of knowledge of structure and terrain and where they are, historical patterns, all that stuff. You're not going to get it if you're not out there.
That's correct.
So you would work 20 hours for a conservation bonus point.
Better believe it.
You know, I've always felt that we have the loyalty bonus point, the hunter ed bonus point, and each year that you're unsuccessful, you get a bonus point. A conservation bonus point, particularly for the young kids growing up, would be an invaluable tool for them to have in years going forward. My guess is that we would have no more than 2,000 people out of the 100,000 applicants who would go for that conservation bonus point.
I agree. Maybe less.
It's stunning
That's
to me.
Unbelievable.
Well, and when you consider that people who'll do anything for a bonus point, I mean, they may say, it's not worth it to me to do that, but you try and take away one of their bonus points, the roof would come off the building. I know that.
Well, hunting, similarly to fishing, 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish. And in hunting is very similar. I mean, your better hunters overall are going to do better than guys that don't give it a 100% effort.
Yeah,
exactly. You don't accidentally catch something worth recognition.
No, you don't.
No, I looked at it too, and I thought, every tag I've filled for the last 4 tags that I've had, my sons have filled their tags each time they've had one, and I know, Pete Somolero was talking to me, and he called in over 100 bulls in 23 this year. But he had the opportunity, he's retired, and he had the opportunity to stay there for the full 2 weeks. And he said it was the most phenomenal hunt he's ever been on. It was quiet. They were glassing up bulls. And then when that big monsoon came through, the rain, It turned them on like mad.
Wow.
Yeah. He said he called in bull after bull after bull, and they were just screaming and having a great time.
That's amazing.
So it's a matter of timing and being out there. Like my son, he had to fly in from Portland. We had a limited time window in which to hunt. He flew in Tuesday night. We were up there Wednesday, and at 10:30 Wednesday, we finally got to a spot where we could actually physically begin to hunt. And I started calling at 10:30 in the morning. They were responding. And that's how weird it was. And they ran until noon that day. But we want to get more people involved in the process, understanding. It's almost like the old guard is getting too old to do anything anymore. Yeah. And we're tired. I mean, I've been working on banquets and things like that since 1987.
Well, it doesn't take, I tell you what, you take a kid out and he sees wildlife, you're going to know right then and there whether he's going to be hooked or not.
Yeah.
And most of them are.
It's amazing how outdoor experiences create memories like that.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Put them on a red elk hunt and let them watch that once. They're a lifer then.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back. I'm John Colazar.
With Derek Franks.
Joe Nocta.
And you're only getting mugged if you go downtown.
End of the world, folks. We're fortunate. We've seen, and I think we've been through the best of times in hunting and fishing. And I don't know nobody knows what the future holds, but I'm sincerely grateful for the opportunities that I've had, particularly here in Arizona, to hunting and fishing.
No doubt. You know what's interesting about Arizona is most citizens here are not aware of the wildlife opportunities here. I lived here 4 years before I even knew there was water. And now I'm a guide. So I went from
we have more boats per
100
capita than California does.
Well, my father came from Pennsylvania and was absolutely, totally shocked when he got here and found out what opportunity there was. And he was an outdoorsman. So,
believe it or not, that's why I left Michigan.
I know in the 50s, they used to bury their rifles to where they couldn't get to them when they drove into Kaibab. Because he said you'd shoot a monster deer on the way to camp. And it's over.
Yeah.
I mean, those times are gone. I mean, that's...
I know from people who I've talked to who were here in the 50s, some of the old guys who were hunting in the 50s, it was nothing for them to see 300-400 deer in a night just driving the back roads.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and those I've never seen anything even remotely close to that because of the fact that two things happened. Number one, Smokey the Damn Bear, who I think was the greatest cause for forest fires that I've ever seen, and it just strikes me so strange that they still play on Smokey. Prevention of forest fires, natural fires, over the years has resulted in the overgrowth that we've had and the rapid explosion of trees. We have way too many. And if you take a look at Arizona historical pictures back in the 1880s, 1890s, when photography was just coming into existence, you look at some of those pictures from then and you look at them now, we were plains, grasslands. There was tremendous amount of grasslands. Now you look at it and it's just boomed over with pinyon and juniper junk trees, and they suck water. And I mean, that's one of the biggest enemies we have. And yet, the pine forests that we have up there, the ponderosa forests, there have been forest fires since the beginning of time. And yet, when we try and prevent forest fires, when you do have one, and it is inevitable, whether it's human cause, whether it's lightning strike, and particularly lightning strikes here, when you have a forest fire and you've had fire retardant suppression for over 50 years, 70 years I think it is for Smokey now, what you wind up with is not a fire, it's an inferno. You incinerate the ground, 18 inches below the surface. That's how hot it gets, and nothing's going to grow for a period of 10 to 15 years. Right. It's absurd, and yet they still keep preaching on the Smokey thing. And I haven't figured it out yet, but I think I've always felt, since I've learned, and most people will say, oh yeah, never have forest fires, don't have forest fires. Forest fires are a good thing.
Yes.
I mean, you've seen it. Look at Unit 1 and 27 now. What have you seen?
The growth is incredible. I mean, it's. I mean, you never want to see a cabin go down or somebody's home go down ever, but these things could have been resolved by doing control burns many, many years ago.
Oh yeah.
In doing what's right for it instead of letting it be an inferno, because that's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, you're supposed to have, I've seen a number of studies done out of NAU and a number of places. On ponderosa pines, you should have no more than, I think it's 15 to 20 trees per acre. They're mature trees. Wow. That's what you're supposed to have. And you can literally find spots to this day where there's hundreds of little stunted trees along with some of the more mature trees. And what you wind up with is pine needles that are 8 to 10 inches, even deeper, when you're walking around. And those pine needles are the best fire. It incinerates stuff because it gets so hot. Pine runs that way. And when you have pine needles on the ground and it incinerates everything, it just goes crazy. So
definitely.
We'll see what happens with that. All right, Derek, I know you wanted to give a shout-out to a particular lure.
Yeah, I've been doing some promotional work for my Cajun compadres at Rattle Trap, and they are getting ready to come up with some new product development. And to just help them out, I'm asking for all my listeners to vote. And to do that, you go to a website they have structured. It's www.missionmainstreetgrants.com/vote with a code of 71301, which is their zip code.
73101. Where is that?
It's 71301, and that's in Alexandria, Louisiana, where I'm born. So I've got a nice reciprocity with
there's
them.
The Cajun tie.
Oh, yeah. Get Cajun on them. But, yeah, so it's a great American-made lure company. I've always had a thing for them. So. And
they're going after a grant?
Yeah, they're going out for a grant so that way they can extend the opportunity for new lure development to come up with some new lures for consumers. So it's
all right. Give it one more time.
It's missionmainstreetgrants.com/vote with a code of 71301.
71301.
Yeah.
If I can do Striper Snatcher, I can do 71301.
That's right. Well, we didn't start off that great.
No, we did not. It's okay.
Don probably punched himself in the leg when he heard that thing start off.
I'm sure there will be an earful when he returns and he has to listen to that opening segment.
Yeah. We can edit that part.
No, we can't. It's live. There's nothing we can do about that.
Hopefully he didn't get it.
All right, Joey, what's on your horizons now in terms of the hunt in the store?
Well, the store, I'm hoping this coming week we will finally get our first line bow in. We got a meeting with PSE, and that's who we're probably going to go ahead and bring in. We'll see how that goes for next week. Glenn and Pat were absolutely swamped this year changing out bowstrings. We hooked up with a custom bowstring manufacturer, and I know at one point I think we had 18 of them, 18 string change outs lined up.
Wow.
So, and we're selling bows. Those are going all right. The firearms went down a little bit during the summer.
Yeah.
And that'll probably start picking back up as it's cooled down. The maps always do well. I mean, Wide World of Maps I rent them that room there, and they do a great job for 400 square feet. They stuff it full, and
they're seeming to do that. I'm seeing more and more spots now that are carrying part of Wide World of Maps.
They're calling it their mini stores, but we're carrying probably pushing 50% of the topos for all of Arizona in stock.
Wow.
And if we don't have it, we'll get it made for you usually within a couple days. And their plotter is now down at my store, so they're actually being made there.
What's it run for a good unit map to be done? A game unit map, like Unit 23.
Well, from my topo, the large units are $34.95. The small units are $19.95. We're going to be but Wide World buys those. Okay, so, but maybe by next year we're going to be doing our own custom maps.
There it is.
The owner, Jim Willinger, and myself, and Paul, we've been talking about how to use that plotter to maybe not a 7.5, but maybe go to a 15-minute and put in a bigger area and be able to center it. So you know what happens if you go in and the place you want to hunt is right on a corner. You're buying 4 maps.
Yes, you are.
Okay. They have the capabilities to center punch something and build the map around it.
Oh, that would be so awesome.
We've been in negotiations to do that, and hopefully by next year that'll be out.
When's the last time? I mean, they're constantly updating topo maps now, aren't they? Because of the ability, number one.
I've seen some of the topos still dated in the 40s, and most of them are still dated in the mid-60s.
This 1969 GPS mapping from the Forest Service is still being used?
Oh, yeah.
You're kidding.
Well, that's
I thought they were all like 1990s and 2000s that they started them again.
Not the 7.5s.
Really?
Yeah, you can see the dates on them. So there's water holes and there's numerous things that are missing on there.
Quad trails.
Yeah, quad trails everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, you can literally. They did a mapping for us of the Apache sitgraves, particularly on the Apache side, over by Unit 1 and 27, and they showed us a map pre-1994, and then they showed us one. This was like 6 years ago, and I was astounded. It was if you put in the new roads that have been created through OHV travel, you could go from California to Washington D.C. and not stop, based on the roads that they have just in the Apache side of the Apache sitgraves.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. And it's like anything else. It's a multi-use that we're involved with, where we're attempting to have everybody enjoy the use of the land. But when are we going to hit that saturation point, and particularly with OHV travel? I mean, everybody wants to go somewhere different. Nobody likes to be, I call them nose-to-butt trail rides. You don't want to be the last man in a quad ride. No. Yeah, because you're covered with dirt by the time you're done with it. And even if you're just the second one, you're covered with dirt.
Well, they've been trying to do, there are some quad-only trails.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're going to need to do to, but stuff like that will help. It'll allow people that want to go back where someone's not going to drag a trailer back. They'll be able to do it on their quad.
All right. Well, we're going to chat a little more about it, but when we come back, Mr. James Guggenhauer from Payson, Arizona, where the weather is, as Don says, always wonderful.
The morning's kind of damp. I'm not worried about cutting the grass. Left my truck at the boat ramp and my boat is full of gas. My old boss thinks I'm sick today. He won't have me to harass. Cause I'm out here on the river.
And he can kiss my big old bass.
Kiss my bass.
That can only mean one thing. We have the incomparable Mr. James Guggenhauer on the line. Good morning, James. How are you?
Good morning, J.K. I'm doing fine, thank you.
I know. The weather is phenomenal up there this weekend, isn't it?
It is. It's, the other day we were down to 40. We might have been a little bit above that today. It's just perfect weather. Clear skies and no breeze today.
Oh, man. Unbelievable. Okay, before we get into fishing, you know me, what's the status? You hearing them bugling still? The elk?
Status of what?
The elk, are they still bugling?
I have not heard them. I don't know if they're on the move or what has changed, but in the last week it's gotten strangely quiet with the bulls and the cows. Yeah. So I guess a lot of people in the woods, maybe they just moved out.
All right. What's the fishing report right this week from the Mother Lake?
It's got to be good.
Some big changes to the lake. The monsoons that everybody's been talking about. I was just checking the water level this morning, and it did come up another 1%. So in the last 2 weeks, we've come up 2%. The level in the lake has raised over a foot in the past 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's really good news. And on top of that, even though the flows are starting to come down now, we still have the Salt River flowing at about 400 cubic feet per second, and the Tarno is flowing at about 40 cubic feet per second. So good water coming into the lake. However, the water that's coming in is just a chocolate brown. I mean, it is so dark
yeah.
that it is unreal. On the Tarno end of the lake is discolored clear down to the Rock Creek area. And that's real close to the Choya.
Choya Bay.
On the salt end of the lake, it is stained all the way down to Grapevine Ramp. So, and along with that water, there's some debris in there, too.
Oops.
So telling people that if you're fishing and you're out there in your boat, be careful, because there are not big trees floating in the water. There's a lot of good-sized limbs that are in the pathways where a lot of bass boats like to go.
That'll do something to your prop, won't it?
Oh, yeah.
It'll take a lower unit out in a hurry.
Yeah.
Now, the flow coming into the lake, it's also affecting the temperature. There's some huge changes in water temperature. The fresh water coming in is in the low 70s, and if you move to the clearer water, which is in the main portion of the lake, it'll be in the high 70s, even to the low 80s in the afternoon. So, I know that there's some tournaments up there yesterday, and I saw some guys up pre-fishing on the salt end up in that dark and cold water, and I'm sure they'll catch them up there, but that water's kind of cool and running in there pretty hard. But like your guest was saying earlier, I mean, this is great for the lake. It's great nutrients that are coming in there for the fish, and all that is success for the fishery. So we're happy to see it.
No doubt.
And, even with all those changes, though, it didn't make a big change to the fishing report. Fishing report was called good this past week, and for the first time this fall, I talked to a couple anglers that were using jigging spoons, and they were catching good numbers of fish in 30 feet of water. Our listeners, most of them know what that is, but we're talking about a 1 ounce or a 3/4 ounce spoon that you just cast out and just kind of let it drift down through the
1001, 1002.
Yeah, that's exactly what the striper are going for too, James. What I've noticed is the thermocline levels raise significantly, and those fish in the day are in that depth that you're referencing, which it makes it a little bit easier to catch them.
Yep, exactly right. And like you were saying, if you find one of those areas, you're also going to see some bait balls in there.
Definitely.
So we were just looking for, the largest amount of baits that we could find, making some long casts and drifting through that, and it was fun. The bass we were catching, their stomachs were just full of shad. They looked like they were full of eggs in in the spawn. That's
oh, nice.
So they're chasing them. They're also chasing them in the backs of coves. They're still getting good reports of bass chasing the shad up into the shallows and then busting the surface on there. We're telling everybody, you need to keep a clear color or a silver color Rio Rico on a rod. If you see the fish chasing in the back of the cove, those two baits are, all I can say is they're killer.
Yep.
And just keep it close in hand, and if you see that, just go for it. Crankbaits are also working really good this past week, and drop shot, 4 or 6 inch drop shot in 10 to 20 feet of water, catching large amounts of fish.
Nice.
What about the crappie report?
Yeah, that's at the other end of the continuum.
Oh, the poor crappie.
Their word was it was pretty tough fishing for crappie, and the reason is just the things that were favorable for the bass.
Yeah, the chocolate.
Crappie don't like big changes in weather. They like stable, calm, no wind, flat water, nice sunshine, where they can school up and they can all kind of hang around a brush. When you start getting the water temperature changes and the color of the water changing, they just seem to disappear for a couple of days. So we're telling people that for this coming week, you're going to be fishing the main portion of the lake because the water's clearer there. The main portion would be from about Vineyard up to Windy Hill. Those are the areas you'd want to stay. Don't go anywhere near where a stream is coming into the lake. But if you can find an area like down near the dam where there isn't so much stream coming in, you'll be fishing in 25 to 35 feet of water and always look in a brush there. But a wide variety of baits were being used this time. We've been talking about some specific ones, the Little Fishy and some other John Deere colors. But we're hearing just about any 2-inch grub. At least we'll catch some fish. Not that anybody caught big numbers, but and that's typical for this time of year. We start to see more baits that are working well for crappie. The other thing that the crappie anglers told me to tell people is when you're fishing in this brush, a lot of people say you don't want to set a hook too hard on a crappie because
you rip it out.
Right, but if you're vertical fishing, 95% of the time, you're going to hook that crappie in the roof of the mouth. So if you're using a ultralight or a light power rod, don't be afraid to set that hook. It's important because they are in that brush, and you got to put that kind of pressure on them.
Elevator going up.
Right.
Yeah. I call that giving a fish a free ride to Payson or Phoenix, wherever you live.
There you go. Hey, and then the last area is the trout stockings up on the rim. Arizona Game and Fish stockings have ended now. They go through the end of September. And but with the end of that program comes our community fishing program. So they've already started, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Next week it starts here in October for October 13th in Payson. And then the week or two after that, they begin the Valley Lakes with trout stockings. So if you like taking your kids to those community fishing lots, get ready. It's your time to go out there and fish for some trout.
Little Green Valley, do they get it year-round, stout truckings, or does that stop now?
Green Valley is a little unique because they don't stock catfish in there. Most of the lakes in the valley, they put trout in the wintertime, and then they stock with catfish during the summer. Up here, we just get the trout. But we do get them longer than the valley because we're a little cooler up here.
Yeah.
As I said, they'll start next week up here, about 2 to 3 weeks later in the valley. But then they go through about April or May up here, so we get them a little longer in the spring, too. So it's a great place. If you haven't fished Green Valley in Payson, you need to load your family up and bring your dad, too, and sit there on that lake and fish. It's a great time.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. It's the best time of year, too. Is the color starting at all up there?
Oh, yeah. It's for about the last 2 weeks. We've been getting changes. It's real beautiful up on the rim. All the deciduous trees are in full bloom. So we're telling everybody, come on up, take a ride. One more thing before I go, J.K. Everybody will recall that with the community fishing program, that's covered under your regular fishing license now.
Correct.
Years past, you used to get a special permit to fish the community fishing program. No longer required. So
yeah, if you buy the fishing license this year, the new program, you don't have to worry about stamp. Everything's covered. Correct.
Right. You got it.
All right. Well, James, thank you very much for the report. And next week, the Bass Daddy will be back, and I'm sure he'll be probing you for more secrets than I do. But we appreciate the effort as always. You have a great weekend, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back. I'm still the guy. All right. Thank you, Jen. Yes, we truly are still guys. All right, we're closing it down. We're getting close to the end of our 2 hours on our Sunday morning journey without the Bass Daddy. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity. Derek, hit it first.
Okay, there's one more mention I want to shout out about a function at Living Word Bible Church on November 1st. That address, well, I'll give it out at the end of my speech, but it's called the Ironman Sportsman's Expo. From 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., it's going to feature a lot of fishing guides, myself, most of Team Nitro, Scooter Griffith and company will be there with Johnny Johnson. They're going to have raffles, food truck, fishing demos, weapons display, off-road vehicles, and RVs. That address for Living Word Bible Church is 3520 East Brown Road, Mesa, Arizona. So
that's really close to me. I mean, that's like Brown. 3900 Brown is probably like Lindsay, Val Vista, Greenfield, somewhere in that area. So that's real close.
Right on. Yeah, I look forward to talking about striper fishing. I'll have my rig out there. And
striper fishing.
Striper.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can get it right. All right, Joey, what have you got going on with Explorer Optics?
Well, they've been doing well. I mean, they're binoculars, rifle scopes, spotting scopes have been doing well. But now they're bringing in a day-night scope, which is...
Day-night scope.
Day-night scope. This thing, you put it on your rifle, you can hunt day or night with it. I can't wait to get one in my hands. They're supposed to be out in 2 weeks now. I talked to the owner of Explorer yesterday. Also, along with the scope, they will have basically 1042 binoculars that will be day-night. Both of these can come with cameras already built into them. There's just, it's supposed to be an incredible little deal. Junior, the owner of Explorer Optics, had a prototype in his hand, and all he told me, he says, wait till you get one. It's awesome. So the guys hunting feral hogs or varmint hunting.
Yeah, the predator hunting at night.
The predator hunting at night, these scopes should just work phenomenally well.
Finally, something to take care of the predator base.
That'd be so fun.
I'm still curious whether it's imagery, green imagery, whether you can tell or how it's going to work, but that's got to be phenomenal.
And it's a green type imagery for the night vision.
But differentiation, that's my key, is can you tell whether it's a deer or an elk or
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, okay.
In the photographs that I've seen, it's not even,
No question?
Absolutely no question.
Can you differentiate between a coyote and a Mexican gray wolf?
Well, that's debatable.
No, it's not. They're all coyotes.
Drop them.
If they're in 4A, they're not supposed to be there. It's a coyote.
It's a big coyote.
Big coyote.
Yeah, they get big.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Just make sure you take that telemetry unit and you hook it onto the back of the Walmart truck headed towards New Mexico. We're not saying, we're just saying, no. Actually, we know that we're not going to touch anything on the Mexican gray wolves because we're finally hammering out an issue that has been simmering for the past 15 years, and that is that the Fish and Wildlife Service seems to be putting a proposal together where we'll have a maximum of 300 to 325 Mexican gray wolves between Arizona and New Mexico. which would mean basically a maximum of 175 here in Arizona. And while I still debate the long-term effects of it, and the fact that there's potential for crossbreeding with the coyote populations, I think that it's something that's manageable. Unfortunately, the Cattlemen's Association doesn't seem to agree with this at the moment. They were not real happy, but I think that that's something that we're going to deal with in the future. So it's not the best of news, but certainly by putting a cap of 325 Mexican gray wolves between the two states, we're in better shape than we were before.
Well, they've already seen what happened to Montana and Idaho, and they want it here too?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we know that even though there are oral arguments made where a species is recovered, quote unquote, or not recovered, Wyoming's hunt was shut down because, the Sierra Club Center for Biological Diversity went to federal court and they shut down their Wyoming hunt just last week. So what would have been the start of the wolf hunt in Wyoming has been put off, and those packs, even though they know that they have more than enough wolves there, they didn't feel the hunt structure was such that it was predictable enough behavior. And so there's not going to be a wolf hunt in Wyoming this year. So we're going to see more and more populations of ungulates being just depleted, and that's unfortunate.
Well, it's amazing how a few can rattle the cages of the government like that and get them to get what they want.
It's all a matter of, number one, semantics, and number two, law schools now are preaching the environmental movement and how to win against the federal government. And quite frankly, when you have compatriots who are now running the Fish and Wildlife Service, you have more anti-hunters than anything else in there. And so they're hint, you might want to sue on this, or you might want to stock us with, say, 70 species. And I saw some reports, and I know they're really valid now, that we've had over 1,500 species that have been listed under the Endangered Species Act since it started. And the success rate or the recovery rate, or however you want to term it, is less than 2%. So all those billions with a B of dollars that have been spent of yours and my federal tax dollars to recover endangered species has failed miserably. And at what point in time do we take a longer and harder look at it and say, okay, we're going to give it this, but not this? I don't know the answer. None of us do, but that's where the money trail is. That the Sierra Club and the Center for Biological Diversity, they're not in it for the recovery of the species. They have made an industry for themselves, and it's called the money tree.
Is there a hunting season on them?
I wish there was. Boy, if I could paintball environmentalists, I would love to do that in a heartbeat. I would travel all throughout Tucson, which is basically Berkeley South, or go north of Flagstaff for Berkeley North, and we could have some fun with paintballs, because they have literally, they may seem to think that it's the world of best intentions for themselves, but quite frankly, I don't believe it for a second. And they're not doing this for species. They're doing it for two things. Number one, money, and number two, to remove you and I from the hunting world.
Hunting, period, is what they're trying to shut down.
Wayne Pacelli from the Humane Society of the United States, which I still, to the day I die, I can't figure out how a group that is supposedly for protection of animals spends so much of their money lobbying and getting involved in political elections, particularly in Maine. I mean, there's a big Maine referendum coming in a few weeks, and I'm going to see, I hope they fail again, because they've dumped over $4 million into the state of Maine to get rid of the trapping, it's use of bait and hounds to get bears. And if anybody's ever been to Maine, you cannot still hunt bears in Maine. Those forests are so big and so thick and so green, you can't possibly do it without hounds and without baiting. And that's an issue that's on their referendum this year. So we'll see what happens. But it's the second time they've been through there. They just like dumping money. And as they say, you take one hunt at a time, you get rid of it, and you go to the next one. Eventually, they want us out of the woods. So
it's exactly what they want. The problem is our tax dollar is spent to actually help conservation, and their dollar is spent on getting rid of us. They're not helping the animals out. They're not helping anything out.
We protect the species that we want. Basically, it's a renewable resource, and it feeds us. They hunt us because that's their pleasure. We hunt animals, they hunt us. They want us out of the woods, and that's their thrill. That's what they get off on, and they do it through the power of the pen and the keyboard. So it's something that I think all of us need to look forward to in the future is that there's going to be more wars, and they're keyboard wars. That's what I call it.
Well, unless it goes beyond keyboard wars.
Well, I hope it doesn't for everybody's sake, but I also think that the misguided and there are some people who call them perverted ambitions. The money tree for the VSA has to go away. We're out of time, folks. Bass Daddy, I want you back. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Derek, thank you. Enjoy as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Had a great time.
We're out of here, folks. Have a great Sunday.
See ya.